Your Excellency Architect Olamilekun Adegbeti, Minister of Mines and Steel Development of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and Chief Host of this summit, Excellencies Ministers, Captains of the oil, gas and mining industries, delegates to this summit, the management of Core International Mining and Marketing Company, the consulting organizers of NAFNES 2022, ladies and gentlemen. I should like to express my appreciation and that of the African Petroleum Producers Organization, APO, for the invitation to be part of this important and timely summit, whose objective, I understand, is to chart a way forward for the development of the natural resource and energy projects in Africa in a sustainable and climate-friendly manner. Discover solutions, exhibit technologies and products that will lead to the growth and industrialization of Africa in a more climate-friendly manner, while also encouraging the development and financing of green energy projects. In their invitation to me, the organizers of this summit were clear in what they wanted me to focus on in my 15 minutes keynote address, and I will try to respect their wish. Before then, however, I find it appropriate to say a few words about the organization that I'm representing and whose positions I'm going to present here today, the African Petroleum Producers Organization, APO. Founded as the African Petroleum Producers Association, APA, in 1987 in Lagos, Nigeria, by 8 oil and gas producing African countries, with the broad objective of promoting cooperation among its member countries in the various areas of the hydrocarbon industry. The association, which became an organization after a major reform undertaken between 2015 and 2019, now has 15 full member countries and 3 observer countries, one of which is from outside the African continent. The full members are Algeria, Angola, Benin, Cameroon, Chad, Congo-Brazzaville, Congo-Kinshasa, Cote d'Ivoire, Egypt, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Libya, Niger, Nigeria, and South Africa, while the observer countries are Ghana, Senegal, and Venezuela. Our headquarters is located in Brazzaville, Republic of Congo. 7 of our member countries also belong to OPEC, making Africa the largest single bloc in that global energy organization. What informed the decision to embark on a major reform of APA to APO, and what has changed as a result of that reform? It's important to know that the thought of founding APA was mooted in the mid-1970s by 4 African oil-producing countries in OPEC to support non-oil producing African countries in their balance of payments challenges due to the rise in global oil prices occasioned by the oil embargo imposed by the Organization of the Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries on some Western countries in the wake of the Arab-Israeli conflict. As other non-OPEC African oil producers got into the discussions, the objectives was broadened to general cooperation in the fields of hydrocarbons. And for over 25 years, APA focused on that broad objective, namely facilitating cooperation among member countries, conducting joint studies, providing fora for policymakers to exchange thoughts on the industry, and so on. Historians of the oil and gas industry in Africa have observed that the oil industry in Africa was developed first and foremost in response to external needs. In other words, the exploration and production of oil in Africa in the last century was largely for export in its crude form. That explains the pattern of oil infrastructure development on the continent, where pipelines almost always run from fields of production to the coasts. The few refineries established during colonial era were established to meet the minimum requirements to facilitate the objective of the colonial economy. And even after independence, not much has changed. We developed consumption patterns that made us to want to continue to export crude oil in order to get the foreign exchange with which to satisfy our appetite for imported foreign goods and services. However, the global paradigm shift away from fossil fuels to renewable energies, which was triggered by the Arab oil embargo of the 1970s, but which gained great momentum after the Paris Climate Agreement of 2015, jolted our leaders to the realization that the foundations of our national economies are shaky. If the source of funding, technology, and markets for Africa's oil and gas industry, namely the developed countries of the world, were to succeed in abandoning fossil fuels in a hurry, how will African oil and gas producing and exporting countries, whose economies have come to rely heavily on oil and gas revenue, survive without that revenue? It was the realization of the possibility of this unpleasant reality that informed the decision of APO leadership to embark on a major reform of APA to be able to address the imminent challenges posed by the global energy transition. And addressing those challenges required a new mandate, a new decision-making process, a new organizational structure, and a new focus that goes beyond a loose association to an organic entity. Over the years, the national economies of most of our member countries became highly dependent on fossil fuels, in many instances leading to a distortion of the pre-oil economy. Governments came to rely more and more on fossil fuel revenue to meet their obligations of governance. At the same time, not much had been done over the years to domesticate the industry. Industry technology remained largely foreign controlled, so was the market and the source of project finance. These were the challenges that necessitated the reform of APA to APO. While Western interests, be they IOCs or financial institutions, cooperated and collaborated to work as partners in relating to African countries on oil and gas projects, African countries continue to relate with these interests, not as a group, but as individual countries. Today, APO thinks and acts continental. We think and act beyond national boundaries. We are looking at developing cross-border, sub-regional, regional, and continental energy infrastructure. We are looking at developing regional and continental energy markets. We are looking at establishing regional centers of excellence in research, development, and innovation. We are looking into raising the required funds to sustain the oil and gas industry in the face of threat by our traditional financiers to abandon us. And we are considering all these in partnership with other institutions with deep interest and commitment to the cause of Africa. These are the new mandates of APO. Before addressing the climate change challenge for the African oil and gas industry and the role APO is playing to mitigate the effects of these challenges on Africa, please allow me to give you some statistics of the oil and gas industry in Africa so that we may put the discussion in a proper context. Statistics show that of the 93 million barrels of global daily oil production, Africa contributes 7.1 million barrels. The figures with gas is 10.8 billion and 470 million scf per day respectively. About 25% of Africa's oil production is refined in Africa, while 75% is exported. And part of that is refined and re-imported back by African countries, including those that originally exported the oil. Similarly, of the total global proven oil and gas reserves of 1.55 trillion barrels and 7,234 trillion scf respectively, Africa has 125 billion barrels and 555 trillion scuff. I need to also mention that a lot of discoveries are being made across the African continent. And if Africa is to focus on the exploitation of these resources, our position on the global oil and gas economy shall be stronger. As for the new energy economy, it has been established that Africa is rich in the rare minerals required for the modern energy economy. From the north to the south, east and west, the continent is blessed with abundant minerals, ranging from nickel, lithium, cobalt, copper, and many other mineral resources, essential to the new energy economy. For example, Africa has some 30% of global mineral reserves. The continent has over 50% of known deposits of global cobalt, while it currently produces over 60%. These are in addition to many renewable energy resources in various parts of the continent, like hydro, solar, and wind. It's therefore right to say that Africa has all it takes to be a major player in the global energy economy, whether fossil-dominated or renewable energy. All we need to do is to put our acts together, look within, commit to making the necessary sacrifices now in order to make Africa realize its manifest destiny in the not too distant future. And this brings me to the question of energy transition and Apple's position on this important global issue. I should like to make it very clear from the very beginning that Apple is not contesting the science of climate change. We are not against energy transition, nor are we against any fair, just and equitable policy or measure introduced to safeguard the atmosphere from harmful emissions and by implication to making life better for humankind. Our position is that measures and policies introduced to check climate change cannot be uniformly imposed on all societies without regard to their special circumstances, like their level of socioeconomic development, energy poverty, environmental challenges, etc. What we are saying is that Africa must not be rushed into abandoning fossil fuels, which it has in abundance, some 125 billion barrels of proven oil and 550 trillion scuff of gas, for some energy whose affordability and reliability is still suspect. What we are saying is that Africa is on the verge of industrial breakthrough and shall need all the energy it can get to make this breakthrough a reality. How many factories have been shut down in Africa as a result of lack of energy? How many African youths have been made idle and unemployed because there is no energy to keep the factories running? Any attempt to deny Africa access to any particular form of energy at this time shall be construed as an attempt to deny Africa the opportunity to break from the yoke of poverty and underdevelopment. What we are saying is that of all nations in the world, the developed countries of Europe and America are the least qualified to tell Africa to abandon fossil fuels at this time, having lost that moral right by their continued use of fossil fuels back in the 19th century, when research by their own climate scientists proved that burning fossil fuels emit greenhouse gases, which are harmful to the atmosphere. Not many people know that the first scientific study that showed that burning fossil fuels emit gases that are harmful to the atmosphere, and by implication humankind, was made over 150 years ago in Europe. In 1959, John Tyndall, a climate scientist, established that burning hydrocarbons affect the atmosphere. 37 years later, in 1896, a Swedish scientist by name Sven Arrhenius, in a seminal paper, showed that CO2 levels could substantially alter the surface temperature through greenhouse gas effect. And in 1938, Guy Callender connected CO2 increases in Earth's atmosphere to global warming. But because they needed the energy to consolidate the growth of their economies, and make the lives of their people better. Today's industrialized countries heed the results of those studies only to bring them to light when their economies have graduated from reliance on energy-intensive economic production to the creation of artificial intelligence and service delivery, which do not require so much energy. Talking about the harmful effects of fossil fuels emission, we are told that Africa, with about 17% of global population, contributed about 3.5% of the global emissions. I think that a more enlightening comparison should be per capita global accumulated CO2 emissions. Here, the United States has 1,200 tons per capita, Europe has 470 tons per capita, and China has 138 tons per capita. The per capita emission for Africa, on the other hand, is only 32 tons. This translates to 2.6% of the per capita emissions of the United States, 7% of that of Europe. Where then is the justice in rushing Africa to abandon the only reliable energy available to it? Africa must not be tricked into abandoning what it has for what it hopes to get from people over whom it has no control. Many African countries today are excited about the prospects of getting money from the Climate Fund. And a major condition for accessing that fund is commitment to abandoning fossil fuel development for renewables. Many countries may end up losing both ways. We only need to recall that in the 12 years since the Climate Fund was established, there has not been a single year that it met its target of 100 billion US dollars. But more disturbing is that these funds, which are ostensibly established to assist poorer underdeveloped countries that have been cajoled to contribute to finding a solution to a problem they never created, are not to be given to them as outright grants. They are mostly concessionary loans with conditions that have left many poor countries in the past in debt trap. It has been observed by some cynics that these climate funds may turn out to be, for African countries with great potentials for the new energy economy, namely those with huge deposits of mineral resources, another way to mortgage their resources to the money lenders. Can Africa go it all alone in a world that has become a global village? Or to reframe the question, should Africa strive to go it alone? What is Apple doing about these challenges? A major study conducted by Apple on the future of the oil and gas industry in Africa in the light of the energy transition identified 4 main challenges that the African oil and gas producing countries must address if they want to continue to benefit from the huge oil and gas resources they have been blessed with. As noted earlier, Africa has over 125 billion barrels of proven oil and 550 trillion scf of frozen gas reserves. These are the challenges of finance, of technology, of markets, and of expertise. The study established that despite producing oil and gas for between 25 and 100 years, most of the oil and gas industry projects in Africa are foreign financed, either by IOCs or some international financial institutions or investors. On technology and expertise, the study established that no African country can claim to have mastered the technology of the whole value chain of the oil and gas industry, upstream, midstream, and downstream. Even the most advanced among them are heavily dependent on external technology and some expertise. As for markets, it noted that 75% of our daily oil production and 40% of gas are exported outside Africa. Many of you might be aware of the initiative between Apple and the Afro-Exim Bank to pool resources together to establish the Africa Energy Transition Bank. An MOU to this effect was signed between the two continental institutions a couple of weeks ago in Luanda, Angola. Our objective is to raise the required funds from within and outside Africa to sustain energy projects, especially oil and gas infrastructure on the continent, in the face of threats of divestment by our traditional financiers. And we are going to be very innovative in raising these funds. On technology, the fact that some of the world's best oil and gas research institutions are being forced to close their faculties and institutions of oil and gas mean that very soon, no new innovations will come up. And without innovations, the industry cannot survive. It's therefore incumbent on us, if we are not to be forced to declare our huge oil and gas resources as stranded assets, to grow the technology in our continent. Towards this end, Apple is spearheading a program on the development of African local content, which is different from what obtains across the continent today, where we have national local contents. We give credit to member country Nigeria for initiating the first Africa Local Content Roundtable last year, with the participation of many Apple member countries. That program has now been taken over by Apple to become a truly continental program. The detailed modalities for the achievement of this objective are still being worked out. But I can say that it shall include the establishment or designation of centers of oil and gas excellence across the continent in the various sectors of the industry, upstream, midstream, and downstream. Also planned are the establishment or designation of regional and sub-regional oil and gas industrial parks. No one country on the continent can go it alone in technology development for the industry. In this regard, we believe that with the right environment, many Africans in the industry, both within the continent and outside, who have excelled in various fields of oil and gas technology, will be happy to come and contribute to making their societies better. We can also attract non-Africans with the right skills to Africa to assist us adapt and develop our technologies. All we need to do is to commit at all levels of our societies to creating the enabling environment for the transformation of our continent. We have to have a timeline for Africans to fully master the technology of the industry. On the absence of external markets for African oil and gas, it's important to note that Africa, with 1.3 billion people, or 17% of the world's population, is the continent with the largest proportion of the world's people living in energy poverty. All we need to do is to develop the purchasing power of the people by creating the infrastructure for energy distribution across the continent. Even the poorest countries on the continent are able to import energy from outside Africa. So why not from within Africa? To achieve these goals, Africa shall need two important inputs: political will and financial commitment from within Africa. And for these two inputs to be forthcoming, African leaders need to see energy security as directly linked to their national security. For the first time in its 35 years, Apple plans to organize a summit of heads of state of its member countries, the main objective of which is to mobilize support for our initiatives at the highest political level. Until African countries classify energy security as critical to their national security, Africa shall continue to grope in the dark. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope we shall have a very fruitful exchange, and I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.